Hello aspirants and welcome to Legacy IAS Academy and the Impact program, Impact 2025, that is intensive mains practice and content training. So this is class number 10th and we'll be starting with Indian economy. I'll be taking that up. Now Indian economy, we will divide this in 4 different classes. The last of the 4th class will be exclusively on agriculture. Plus, we have 3 more divisions of economy. So let us see how we have divided into 4 parts. The very first part talks about the Indian economy and the issues related to planning, mobilization, the resource mobilization, growth, development, and so on. Then you have inclusive growth, a very important phrase for UPSC. Of course, you should focus on each and every term, keyword that is mentioned in your syllabus and work on that. But there will be other topics as well because UPSC does mention etc., which leaves the scope sort of unlimited. But whatever words are included, that needs to be focused upon. And when you talk about inclusive growth, many times UPSC has asked mains question specifically about inclusive growth. In fact, in the last year also, it has been there. Plus the government budgeting etc. is what we will take up in part 1, that is in today's class. Then we'll move ahead with part 2, that is banking in India, financial market, other macroeconomic indicators of the Indian economy and the effects of liberalization of the economy, the privatization, the globalization, so on and so forth. The third part will deal with land reforms in India. Then you have the infrastructure, the energy, road, airport, railways. Now this has been a very favorite topic of UPSC even in prelims as well as in mains. We'll see that as well. Investment model and government schemes. Direct questions on government schemes is also very much eminent in UPSC. And the fourth part, a very important part, will be agriculture and related activities. Plus, we'll include food management and food processing also here because these are related to agriculture. Even food processing is related to agriculture. Now, in this session, we'll be focusing on improving your answer writing. So there are certain expectations which has already been set from the class 1, that is the content part, the understanding part should already be present with you, and that should not be an issue for any serious aspirant. Here we will specifically focus on improving your answer writing skill with the help of the PYQs and the sessions that we will conduct. So let's get started. The very first question that we take here is, it says that it is argued that the strategy of inclusive growth, so again inclusive growth comes into the picture, strategy of inclusive growth is intended to meet the objectives of inclusiveness and sustainability together, full stop. Comment on this statement. It's of 15 marks, 250 words, asked in 2019. Now, the keyword, the directive word is comment over here. All those things have been taken up in class in the first session itself. So it's safe to assume that you are thorough with it. Now, the most important part about answer writing is to understand what the question is saying. Once you understand that, which is the most important part, then you can do the second most important part, that is address what is being asked. Right? And also remember, when certain thing is being mentioned with respect to certain keywords, make sure that you answer with respect to those keywords. I'll give you an example here. So let's, start analyzing this question. This question says that it is being argued, it is being said by people, the economists or whomever it is, that people are arguing that the strategy of inclusive growth that is there, that is intended to meet the objectives of inclusiveness and sustainability together. Means it is not going separately, it goes hand in hand. The objective is to meet the inclusiveness and sustainability together. So when you are answering inclusive growth points, you have to answer both with respect to inclusiveness as well as sustainability. Correct? So there's a full stop. And then it says comment on this statement. Comment on the statement. That means what? The scope is open for you, it is flexible for you as to what you will do. There are various ways to approach. Now let us see what can be the approaches and what approach should be taken. They are saying it is argued. They are not saying it is necessary, it is a must, nothing like that. It is saying it is argued that it is intended for inclusiveness and sustainability together. Comment on this statement. So you can take an approach in which you completely deny it. No, it is not the case at all. Or a second approach which can say that yes, that is the case and that is the only case, right? Or the third approach can be yes, that is the case, but probably not necessarily. So midway can be the way forward over here. So which case we'll take? Of course, the very first case which says that no, it is not the case at all. And anyhow, do not start your answers or write words like no, it is not the case, yes, it is the case. There's no need to use those words. I am just writing the kind of approach. The first approach that I said was no, that may not be the case, and we'll expand on that. We can avoid that, right? Because of course, prima facie, it is very clear inclusiveness. When we are talking about inclusive growth, it is taking inclusiveness into picture as well as sustainability. So the denial will be completely eradicated from here. So what we'll do is we'll club the two approaches, the other two approaches. One is acceptance. Yes, that is the case. And along with acceptance, we'll also say what other thing it might bring up or what thing can be done better as well. Okay, so we'll kind of majorly agree with this statement and move ahead. Since it is comment and not critically analyze, if it would have been critically analyzed, of course you would have to agree as well as disagree to a similar kind of extent, 50-50, 60-40, so on and so forth. But since it's comment, it is open for your interpretation and your opinion on it. So of course, opinion does not mean any random subjective opinion. It needs to be backed by facts, logic, etc. All right. So we'll agree with this statement, and also we'll find out certain challenges and what the way forward is. That should be our approach. I hope the approach is clear. So now when the approach is clear, let's see how to introduce this answer. Now in introduction, as you can see, you can define inclusive growth or you can define sustainability. All this thing you can do. But I'll tell you, I'll give you an advice over here. When you're practicing, don't practice with respect to definition. Definitions you should know, of course, the content you should know, but do not practice with definition. Definition should be the last resort generally when you're not getting any current affairs related thing, historical background, any facts, figures, etc. Then you can take the help of definition and move ahead. So out of 20 questions that you will be solving, maybe in 10 questions you might have to take the help of definition and move ahead, and only around 10 questions you can write better introductions. So when you're practicing, at least then practice for better introductions and not just definition. However, having said that, there will be certain questions in UPSC which says define. For example, we'll see one question later on which says define potential GDP. In that case, the introduction itself can be the definition of potential GDP, and you can directly start addressing your answer in the introduction itself, because the demand of the question is like that. Here it is not asked to you to define anything, right? But of course, definition is one possible way of introducing your answer. However, I would suggest that try to get some other kind of an introduction which would be better. But if that is not clicking, then definition is the very easiest way forward, so that you do not waste your time. Do not waste your time in deciding what the introduction should be, because that will be more costly. So very easy way could be to define inclusive growth, sustainability. A better way could be, can you talk about the linkage between the two, that is inclusive growth and sustainability, how they are interconnected. If you write an introduction connecting inclusive growth and sustainability, that sets a good platform for you to build on your answer of agreeing with the statement that was given. I hope that is clear. So what can be our introduction? The linkage between inclusive growth and sustainability, how they are interconnected, how inclusive growth reduces disparities and helps in long-term development and the overall development, so the economy will be more robust and hence more sustainable. So with this we can set the tone and the platform of the answer. Now let's look at the question again. So it is argued that strategy of inclusive growth is intended to meet objectives of inclusiveness and sustainability together. Comment on this statement. So we have started positively by linking the two, right? And now we need to give proofs, evidences, facts as to how it is linked, right? So how we can so the main body will consist of what? The major part will be talking about agreeing with the statement and how it is linked. We need to mention how it is linked along with examples or facts or figures is what we have to talk about. So first thing is the economic dimension. Right, inclusiveness will have economic dimension, social dimension, sustainability is also there. So environmental dimension, all these dimensions will be there, which you have to cover. That is how your answer will become multi-dimensional. So what is the economic dimension here? Equitable distribution of wealth. So when you talk about inclusive growth, it talks about equitable distribution. So how do you do that? The progress in MSME, skill development. Here you can take the names of the schemes. Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana for microfinance, Jan Dhan Yojana for financial inclusion. It all promotes sustainable economic, it all promotes inclusiveness, which promotes sustainable economic growth. So remember, whatever points we are writing, we are taking both inclusiveness and sustainability together. Do not leave any one part away. Second is, of course, the social dimension. In social dimension, the education, the skill development will come. So skilled labor, which will again ensure long-term economic and social stability. When you're talking about skill, you can mention things like India is facing structural unemployment. Means what? There is a mismatch between the skill that the economy requires and the skill that the economy actually has. So that can be bridged, right? At the same time, when it is bridged, it will lead to a long-term sustainable economic growth, because once employment increases, it generates revenue for the foreseeable future. And for that, you can talk about the national education policy, you can talk about the Skill India mission, you can also talk about the apprenticeship Yojana. Now this comes to the content part. You should be sorted with that. I will just tell you that you have to mention the schemes of the government which is helping to do. And then there is environmental dimension. Why are we taking economic, social and environmental dimension? Very simple, because inclusive growth is talked about. When there is inclusive growth, there needs to be socio-economic development. And since sustainability is there, the growth can be sustainable only when the environment is also sustainable. So that element you will bring in. However, do not mention the environment part first. Okay, so we'll mention all these dimensions, but environment part cannot be the most important part over here, because we are talking about the economic growth over here, inclusiveness over here. So environment part would be the last part which you'll talk about. So this is how the major portion of your main body of the first answer will be. However, you will talk about challenges then. The moment you talk about what challenges, you can talk about the trade-off between growth and environment, where to focus more, right? So challenges, and once you write challenges, you have to give the solution. Way forward is nothing but the solution. Remember, way forward is not your conclusion. Way forward is your solution. So here you can give the solution about green economy, balanced industrial agricultural development, how you can ensure that inclusiveness is accompanied with sustainability, right? Because that need not necessarily be the case all the time. And then finally you can conclude. What is the conclusion? Do not mention solutions in the conclusion, right? Never mention solution in the conclusion. Conclusion is separate. So how to think about the conclusion? Whatever solutions you have provided, think in your mind, if the solutions that I have provided is absolutely implemented completely, then what will be the future of India, Indian economy and the world? For example, if it's world related question, if it's India related question, of course India. So what will be the future? And write that future aspiration as a part of your conclusion. For example, here you can give reference to sustainable development goals, SDGs, specifically economic growth and reduced inequalities. So what can be the conclusion here? Conclusion can be something like, okay, with the help of multi-pronged approach as mentioned above, India can be on the path of achieving sustainable development goals, specifically that of SDG 8 and SDG 10, and lead to further inclusive or comprehensive growth. That way you conclude your answer. So in a 250 word question, the conclusion can be of around 25 words, and introduction around 25 words. The rest of the main body you have to deal with in around 200 words. So this was our first question. Now let's move on to the second one. The second question is again on inclusive growth. Is inclusive growth possible under market economy. I'll also tell you there was another question on inclusive growth in 2024. So inclusive growth is a very important favorite topic of UPSC. Is inclusive growth possible in market economy? This is a direct question that they have asked. You have to answer this, okay? Then state the significance of financial inclusion in achieving economic growth in India. By the look of it, it is very simple. You can say that more people will be included financially, more, let's say more capital formation, more labor force participation, more money in the market, more investment, more of everything will happen. So logically, it has to lead to the growth in India, definitely. So we'll discuss that in detail. So this question needs to be broken down into two parts. Very important to know. This question needs to be broken down into two parts. Is inclusive growth possible under market economy? This is also a very important part. State the significance of financial inclusion in achieving economic growth. Now this is of 10 marks. UPSC does not give you the division, whether the division of the first part is 4 marks and the second part is 6 marks or anything like that. But by the tone of the question, by the nature of the question, what is being asked, you should be able to understand how much weightage should have been given or how much you should focus over here. So is it like this is just 1 mark and this is 9, or this is 9 mark, this is 1? No, it is not the case. If you look at it, is inclusive growth possible under market economy? You cannot simply say yes or no. You have to analyze it, give reasons for it, and then conclude your, not conclude the answer, but then come to a conclusion whether it's possible or not. This is also going to take a lot of words and a lot of analysis. Second is state the significance. This is probably more straightforward, the second part. So it can be around 5 marks or 6-4 marks will be the distribution. So you have to sort of focus almost equally on both the parts. Very important to remember the distribution if there are 2 parts. Sometimes it can be very simple. For example, define potential GDP and how it can lead to XYZ thing. So if it's of 10 marks, define potential GDP will not hold 5-6 marks in it. Rather, it will be of 2 or 3 marks, and the major part will be the rest of the answer. We'll see that kind of question also. But here, it is almost similar weightage. I hope that is absolutely clear. Now, moving ahead. Of course, you can define inclusive growth, market economy, but would you want to? Just think of it. Okay, is it possible, they are saying? So why is the need to define these two? If you are not getting any other introduction, define it and move ahead. Else, don't. I am completely against defining if you have other things in hand. Definition should be the last resort to move ahead. I'll keep on repeating this unless and until definition is specifically asked. If it is specifically asked, then you have to define and start the answer with definition itself. So what you can talk about? You can again basically state the central argument. What is the issue all about? Is it or is it not? So you can set the tone by saying that market economy is focusing on efficiency, profit, etc. Right? Whereas inclusive growth, and you can also mention it is dependent on demand and supply. Market forces, that is demand and supply only. However, inclusive growth is next to impossible, or for inclusive growth, there would be a requirement of an intervention of the government or the state. Right? So you have stated a conflicting thing in the introduction also already, and then you can expand on that particular thing. So while market economy is focused on efficiency and profit, inclusive growth requires state intervention to correct the market failures, or instead of market failures, you can write down to correct or to address the shortcoming of market economy. You have set the tone. You have sort of given a hint what is to follow now, and then focus over here. Possibility of inclusive growth in market economy. How is it possible? See, possible because there will be a lot of innovation, lot of production, high production will be there. Everyone can get things. If market economy is not there, if profit motive is not there, people will not only produce, will not be attracted to produce. When people will not be producing, there will be no goods only, goods and services only to be distributed. So market economy's presence is required in order to have innovation, in order to have high production, etc. So first you mention over that and give the examples of that. However, will market economy alone suffice? No. Why? Because it's a pure profit motive. So since it's a pure profit motive, you don't have the money, why do I sell it to you at a lower cost? The demand is high, right? So I am going to sell it at a higher price. You will not get necessary medicines, necessary medical equipment, basic amenities may not be possible. It may be out of your reach. So the last person standing in the queue would not be able to get it. And this is the specific issue with market economy, as a result of which state economy had come into the picture. Now, exactly because of this issue with market economy, the state economy came, and then the mixed economy. So you don't have to dwell much into the state economy, because then you will have to write issues of the state economy. Directly then jump into saying that, see, since there is a market economy, profit driven motives are there, the last person standing in the queue will not be getting the benefits, specifically that of the basic needs, etc. As a result of which state intervention becomes necessary, leading to the mixed economic system. Right? And then mixed economic system is what? India's model. So you can mention India's mixed economic model, wherein the government's intervention through, of course, giving examples like Manrega, Jan Dhan Yojana, Ayushman Bharat, so on and so forth, to provide facilities to the poorest, to a poor section, the poorest of the poor section of the society as well, to the last person standing in the queue as well. So you should use these kind of phrases. Facilities would be available to the last person standing in the queue. These are the phrases you should use in your answers. So that tells us basically that market economy, though the profit motive for innovation, for creation, for production, all that thing is required. However, that alone is not sufficient. You need state intervention. Specifically in certain things, you definitely need state intervention, is what we are going to say over here. And then talking about the second part, that is role of financial inclusion in economic growth. So when financial inclusion happens, you need to tell how financial inclusion is going to lead to economic growth. That is very important. So you talk about improves access to credit. When credit becomes easy, more and more people would be able to start their business easy. Getting credit is one of the factors of ease of doing business. Easier to get the credit makes it easier to start a business. So ease of credit, you can. And now one more thing is, at every sentence or every point, you need not keep on writing schemes after schemes, 3-4 schemes. The options, the schemes are mentioned. You can pick any one or two schemes, and in any one or two points, you can write those schemes. All right. I hope that's clear. Then, of course, promotes savings and investments, that too in the banking system. When the savings is there in the household, in a rice jar, etc., it is not a part of the market, so it is not going to increase the economic growth as such. But when it is in the market, it is invested in the market in one way or the other. And also you can mention about the money multiplier effect over here. All those things, of course, you would have studied. Right? Bridging the urban-rural divide. Of course, why? Because financial inclusion is more in urban area rather than rural. So those people will also come under the ambit of financial inclusion, thus increasing the economic growth. It was a very straightforward part of the answer. Then, of course, the conclusion can be aligned with the reduction in poverty, reduction in inequality, so on and so forth, or improvement in the Human Development Index. So when you're writing, you can mention, you can show your knowledge also over here. At the same time, mention a positive aspiration that with the help of this, India can, improve on its Human Development Index, making its path to the high. HDI is having low, medium, high, and very high. So we can move towards the high, which is our next logical step forward. So I hope this question is clear. Let's move on to the next one, question number 3. Now, question number 3 is a very straightforward question. But when the question is straightforward, your knowledge base and your way of writing should be very exact, because in straightforward question, there is not much of understanding of the question. So that is why you have to structure it in a way which gives you higher marks. We'll discuss how that can be done. So it is saying distinguish between capital budget and revenue budget. This is one part. The second part is explain the components of both these budgets. So two parts, both of them are simple, straightforward, factual, nothing logical or conceptual or analytical over here. So in this, what you should do is, whenever a question on distinguish is asked, it will be best if you can draw the table and write the distinguishment part. But to do that, you have to be very clear, because whatever distinguishing part you are writing for one component, based on the similar field, the second component's part should be written. Right? If you're talking about the definition, both definition, nature, both nature, example, both example. So here your knowledge has to be great. Right? If you are dwindling, I know 2-3 things about this and 2-3 things about this, but not from the same let's say same criteria, so then you will not be able to draw this diagram form, this table form. In that case, you can just choose to write first the capital budget and the revenue budget. First talk about the capital budget 3-4 points with example, and revenue budget 2-3 or 3-4 points with example. If you do not know analogous or analogical points, the point, let's say there is a criteria here, the nature, what is the nature of it, what is the importance of it. So if you don't know criteria wise distinguishment, then you will not be able to draw this table. But any serious aspirant should have that much of knowledge to be able to know the differences with respect to the various criteria. Okay, so this is how you can answer this question. The table is going to help you get better marks. And then you have the components of these budgets. So in the components of this budget, you can draw a tree diagram as well. So you have the revenue budget. In this, what are the components? And then you have capital budget, what are the components? And then you can explain in points. Or if it is just 150 words and time is also less, words are less, so you can just draw the diagram and keep on giving example and explain there itself, and that should be good to go. Or you can chuck the diagram and write it in text itself, that is also fine. If you do both, it will be more time consuming and words will be required. So you can choose either of the way to go ahead. So let's come back to distinguish between capital budget and revenue budget. Here also, of course, you can define or move ahead, but you can also make a statement which talks about how capital investment is, and leads to long-term sustainable recurring revenue, etc. And revenue budget is of day to day. Here itself, you can, what are you doing? You are starting to address the question itself in a 10 marker. Because in a 10 marker, the words are very less, so the introduction should be such that it starts to address the question itself. You can do that. Then, of course, the main body, this is what I was talking about. So what is the nature? It includes receipts. It may not be clear. The PDF which you will download will be clearer. But I'll read it out. It includes receipts and expenditure that affect asset and liability of the government. That is the basic definition. It will affect the asset and liability situation. This will not affect the asset liability situation. It is for long-term investment in liabilities. It is for day-to-day. So you understood this is the content part of it, which should be clear with you. Right? This is how you write. Then you go ahead with the components. So as I said, components, you can simply have capital budget, and under this you can write the capital receipts, the capital expenditure, or within this only you can make the diagram like this: capital receipt, capital expenditure, and under that do the following things which is written in a text manner over here. And the same thing you can do for revenue budget. You have revenue budget. Under revenue budget you can have revenue receipt and revenue expenditure. Write it completely. I'm just telling you how to do about it and give the examples and stuff. So the two diagram would look beautiful, and then you can conclude. Right? Conclusion can talk about what is the present mix of these two in India and what it can be and what result it will yield. So if we can improve on our let's say more of it is capital expenditure, it can lead to long-term investment, development, and recurring revenue as well. Question number 4. The question directly asks, do you agree? So again, here your perspective is required. Of course, it will not just be very subjective, but you have to back it with logic, as I have been saying to you. So do you agree with, and generally what happens is when the question is like, do you agree? Students ask with, yes, I agree. And so you should not do this. That's point number 1. Point number 2, sometimes students do even worse. What they do is, since it will be a question in which you have to say both the positive and negative side, so they will say, yes, I agree because this. And then after half the one page, they will say, no, I do not agree because of this. Don't do that. You are agreeing and then you are disagreeing. Do not mention it like that. The words should be yes and no words. These direct words should not be used. These are absolute objective words. Don't do them. The answers are sort of subjective in nature. So you can first agree with the statement, and then while disagreeing, write however, use the words like however, this is the issue. So that is the way to write the answer. Never write yes and no, all these things in your answer. So question is, do you agree with the view that steady GDP growth and low inflation, so it's a pair of steady GDP growth and low inflation, have left the Indian economy in good shape? Do you agree with this? Right? Give reasons in support of your argument. So basically it's a single part only. There are no double part, because give reason, anyhow you will have to give reason. If instead of give reason they would have written discuss, then also you have to give reason, right? Here explicitly they have mentioned give reason. It's a 10 marker. So do you agree? So how you can do is, first start with agreeing to that statement, and then you talk about however, because of that there are one or two challenges and how you can overcome those challenges, and then conclude your answer. So what will you do? You will majorly agree to the statement because that is what the situation is. However, presently, you can talk about the present situation which is creating a certain issue, or if not present situation you are aware of, you can also talk about how some amount of increased inflation may be required, etc., etc., and then talk about how that can be, how better growth can be achieved with slightly higher inflation, or at the same level of inflation how growth can be even further. You mention all that and then conclude your answer. So introduction, again definition is the last resort. What you can do is state the argument in favor. So start with the agreement, or you can write about any current affair thing, basically with respect to what is the recent situation. Mention that and begin your introduction. And then you have, since it's a 10 marker, the introduction should be such that it directly attacks the question. So you can directly start by agreeing in the introduction itself. Then you have arguments supporting the view. Of course, supporting the view is the major thing we have to do over here, because that has been the thing. Now, since they have asked you, it is not necessary that you take this side also. You can majorly disagree also. So you need to have the economics knowledge to understand which side you should fall more. So macroeconomic stability, consistent stability is there, investor confidence is there, low inflation, things are cheaper as well. So inclusive growth is also there, which is leading to sustainable growth in the Indian economy. Remember one question we did of inclusive growth and sustainability? Bring that into picture. Low inflation is more inclusive for people because things are not that costly. So mention that as well. However, the counter argument, as I said, the counter argument will be dealing with the challenges of this, and then you talk about the overcoming of the challenges. Okay. So what are the challenges that are present? Unemployment. In fact, it is such that India was said to be having a jobless growth. So mention that jobless growth instead of unemployment rate. Mention the first thing, yes, unemployment and jobless growth, or you can simply mention the jobless growth in the Indian economy. So mention about that, provide solutions to that, and conclude. Since it's 10 marker, 150 word, solution should be 2-3 solution in the same sentence you mention it. Do not use 3 sentences or 3 lines for it, and then conclude your answer. Here, generally in 10 marker, if the solution, you have to write a lot of analysis is to be done, your conclusion can be, you can write solution sort of as a conclusion also, and you can avoid it if you are not able to utilize the words in the best possible manner. Solution would be more important rather than conclusion in a 10 marker. So if you are short on words, make sure you write the solution. Okay. However, you can still manage both by writing 2-3 solutions in the same sentence. Challenges, 2-3 challenges in the same sentence. You don't have to. In fact, you should not write like this 3 sentences, and under that you write it in the same sentence and move ahead. That is how you best utilize your word limit. Coming on to question 5. Question 5th. The question asks about distinguishing between care economy and monetized economy. Again, it will be good if you can draw the table over here. I hope that's clear. So draw the table over here between this. If it is not possible, you are thinking that exact analogical differences I don't know, then you can write in, first the care economy, everything about it, and then monetized economy, everything about it. So in this also, since it's of course it's 250 marks, So the introduction can be something else. You need not directly attack the answer. However, it does not mean the introduction has to be completely unrelated. It should at least still set the tone for the entire answer or the coming answer. Absolutely right. So I hope that's clear. So what is the question again? Distinguish between care economy and monetized economy. This is one part. Right. Next part is how can care economy be brought into monetized economy through women empowerment. Now there are two parts. So are both the parts 7.5 marks, 7.5 marks, 50% weightage? When you read the question, you will realize probably that is not the case. This is probably the smaller part. See, no one knows. We are taking a most logical guess with respect to the tone and what has been asked. So this would be probably around 5 marks or so, 5-6 marks, and this will be around 9-10 marks. The weightage to this part will be more than the weightage to the first part. Remember that, and based on that you answer the question. Now, so let's introduce the introduction. Can be talking about the need to migrate from care economy to monetized economy. Or you can directly start with distinguishment also, that is fine. But if you introduce like that, it is good, it sets the tone for the coming answer. And then of course there will be distinction between care economy and monetized economy. Now basically care economy is the economy which is basically unpaid, and monetized is the one where payment is made. That is the difference. And what happens majorly, it's the females, it's the women who are more present in the care economy, and hence which is not paid. So that is why the question also talks about moving towards the monetization through women empowerment. So again, of course, both the things are going to go hand in hand only, right? So first you distinguish, that's very clear, give examples over there, and then talk about integrating the care economy to monetized economy. In introduction, you have mentioned why there is a need, then you distinguish between the two, then you say how you can integrate it through women empowerment. First is valuing unpaid labor. You value it, you recognize it, you do the time use survey, etc., etc. Then skill development and employment opportunities. Now understand, this care economy is too much in the unorganized sector in India, whereas in the foreign, in Western world, in the developed countries, it is already there in the developed sector and it is paid. Of course, a lot of people do it on their own, it is unpaid also, but the percentage of paid over there is very high. That is why you will see that whenever a lot of people from the subcontinent, Asian subcontinent, they move to foreign country, for example USA, they do take someone with them to help them, because that is too costly over there. Why? Because there is a concept of minimum wages. You cannot pay them below that, because they are also in the organized sector. So the next thing you can also talk about formalization of the care work, bringing them in the organized sector. When they are in the unorganized sector, the payment is less. There is no basic payment or minimum wages. There are no benefits and anything like that. So you can formalize it, as well as financial inclusion and economic dependence you can talk about. And then when you conclude, talk about, if you do this, what positive will it bring to the economy, to the society at large, to India at large, right? That is how you conclude this particular answer. Now, coming on to question 6. Now, look at question 6. Question 6 directly states what? Define potential GDP. So, here your introduction can directly be what? The definition of potential GDP. Then it says, and explain its determinants. So, the next part is explaining the determinants of potential GDP. Then there is a third part as well. What are the factors that have been inhibiting India from realizing its potential GDP? So the third part will be the factors that are inhibiting India, but you will not end here. After making that factors, one sentence you have to mention about the solution to that. So whatever the factors, you write the factors, what are the factors that have been inhibiting India from realizing the potential? And you may end it, don't end it there. One sentence of 2-3 solutions in that same sentence, because it's a 10 marker, words are less. So in that one sentence, talk about the solutions, and in another one sentence, conclude your answer. Here, when you talk about the introduction, it is a one sentence introduction. or it can be 2 sentences also, because anyhow you are going to start the introduction by the definition itself. So first introduction, which is the definition itself, then comes a paragraph about the determinants, then you talk about the factors that are inhabitants, then you write solution. In short, it can be 1 or 2 depending upon 1 or 2 sentences or lines depending upon the number of words that are there, and then you conclude the answer. If you are short on words, I will again repeat, instead of conclusion, just mention the solution and conclude, but make sure you write the solution. Okay? Take for example, if your boss asks you what is the issue you are facing or what are the challenges you are facing in the present job, so if you just keep on telling the issues, it will be sort of cribbing. What if you tell the issues but also say, however sir or ma'am or a person to whomever you are addressing, that I have also identified that these can be the possible solutions. That is very much important. Here the solution should not be the major part, definitely, because the major part is going to be this, this and this, but a sentence of solution is required for getting that edge in your answers. So let's look at it. So definition. Now here I would agree that you directly define the potential GDP and move ahead. Till now I have been saying that definition is the last resort, but I have also told you definition is the last resort, but when the question specifically asks for definition, definition can be the introduction as well. Now here the thing is also, it's of 10 marks, 150 words, so the word utilization is also there. What if it would have been of 250 words and 15 marks? In that case also the introduction could be and should have been definition only. You can define, talk about it, give an example, and move ahead to the next part, that is explaining the determinants of potential GDP. I hope that's clear. So look at the approach or the model of this or the structure of this answer. First you define potential GDP. What is it? It is the maximum output of an economy without causing inflationary pressure. Means that does not mean there is deflation in the economy. That does not mean that the prices are going down. That means that whatever inflation is there, it is stable. There is no further increase in the inflation, no inflationary tendency. Of course, that's the content part, which should be already sorted, is what I assume, and we are focusing on answer improvement. So that part you mention, right? And then you of course talk about the determinants. See, in the first part, in the introduction part only I have included that, because introduction and the definition will become one and the same. That is why I have not included this the definition in the main body part. I hope that's very clear. So next is the determinants of the potential GDP. So you write down what are the determinants: human capital, physical capital, productivity, output ratio, all those things you can mention. So directly you are mentioning all this, right? Then the question directly asks you the factors that are inhibiting India from realizing it: low labor force, structural bottlenecks, financial sector constraints, whatever it is, all those things you should mention. Now, as I said, the question did not ask for any solution, but you should write solution. This way forward is nothing but the solution which you should mention. Since it's 150 words, don't write like this, one point, and then under each point you can write in 1 or 2 sentences. You can cover all the points thoroughly and give an example. Okay? And then of course there is a conclusion. Conclusion is what? Conclusion can be assuming whatever solution you have given, if they are implemented, what will be the situation of India. Assume that, write that assumption, aspiration, or the goal for India in your conclusion. Okay? Now coming on to the next question, question number 7th, let's take up here. It says that economic growth in the recent past has been led by increase in labor activity. Explain this statement. So this is the first part of the question. What is the first part of the question? The first part of the question is asking you to explain the statement. What statement? That economic growth in the recent past has been led by increase in labor activity. So this is part 1. Then suggest the growth pattern that will lead to creation of more jobs without compromising the productivity. So it is asking for the growth pattern. What should be the growth pattern so that more jobs are created without compromising labor productivity? Now, more jobs are created means what? If you are investing X amount of money, One sector may lead to 100 jobs, another sector may lead to 1000 jobs. So focus on that sector which leads to 1000 jobs. That is the idea behind this question. So that is the growth pattern that you will select. I'm telling you that a bit because it is not just the content you directly place here, but a thought which you need to give. That boss, let me focus on those areas which will generate more jobs with the same amount of investment. For example, your MSME sector, this, that, but at the same time, when you do that, you should ensure that productivity is not hampered. That means there should not be disguised unemployment. You know, a job that requires 10 people, I am employing 20 people and saying jobs have increased. No, productivity has gone down. That should not happen. So disguised unemployment, you can mention that to ensure that there is no disguised unemployment or productivity is not reduced. Right? So that is the concept of this answer. Now here there are two parts. So again the question comes, out of 15 marks, what is the weightage? So if you look at this, economic growth in the recent part has been less by increase in labor activity. Explain this statement. Now this statement, to explain this also you will require a lot of analysis. So it is not just, it is just 2-3 marks. It will also be of 6, 7 or close to 7.5 marks. And then second, suggest the growth pattern. So you can probably assume that around 7 marks and 8 marks, more or less similar weightage needs to be given. So similar emphasis will be required to be given on both the parts. So introduction talks about expanding on the given statement. So expand on the given statement, giving present recent scenario, what is the facts or figures about this which indicate that the increase has been due to labor activity. Talk about it, right? So increase in labor activity as the growth driver, the gig economy has increased, informal sector has increased. All those are labor intensive things which are happening. And growth in low skilled services also. When low skilled services are there, of course, you know, with less amount of money, more jobs are there. So the economy is driven by this. Now, challenges to this growth model. What can be the challenges to this growth model is what you have to mention. The challenges can be low productivity, of course, is one challenge. Job market polarization, skill development, etc. Huge amount of population, skill is not there, structural issues can be there. So then you have to suggest the growth pattern for more jobs without compromising productivity. So this growth pattern will of course have to be labor intensive industrial. It has to be labor intensive. So we are talking about labor intensive industrialization. It has to be labor intensive, but not compromising productivity. It should not compromise the productivity. That is very important. Then skill development and education, of course, is required. Why? You can write one equation. You know, that equation will help you in a lot, can help you in some other topics answer also. That equation is what? Population. When population is provided with education or skill development plus health, it gets converted into human capital. So instead of a sentence, if you write this equation and box it, it is going to catch the eye of the invigilator or of the paper checker. That is very important to catch the eye. The person is also a human being. If you present it better, how you present also becomes important, because others would also have written the point why you should get that half mark extra, because probably you have presented that bit way better. That is very important. Formalization of the economy, boosting green digital economy. One more thing can be that generate that demand and then satisfy that demand. For example, the things that Swiggy and Zomato have done. We were not eating that much outside. Now they have made us habitual. They have created the demand and now they are only satisfying that demand. That kind of examples are going to help you, and that is what is going to make you stand out in the answers and get you more marks. Now conclusion. So conclusion, what all solutions you have talked about, the growth model that you have given. You can assume that the growth model is, you can also, since it's of 250 marks, mention however this growth model may have certain challenges. In one line mention it, however they can be overcome through the solutions. So mention those solutions and then conclude your answer. Why are we saying this? You have given the growth model. Does that mean that your growth model has no issue? No, it will also have issue. So it is very, very important that you mention challenges over here, or else it gives a very negative connotation that, First of all, you have not written any challenges. Second of all, since you are giving that model, does it mean there is no challenges? No, there will be challenges. So mention those challenges and then provide a solution. What can be the possible solution of those challenges? And then conclude your answer. The conclusion will be about assuming if the solutions are implemented thoroughly, implemented properly, then what will be the future or goal or achievement of India in the future. So what was the question again? With respect to the question again, you can have a look at it and write a solution over here. They have asked to suggest the growth pattern that will lead to creation of more jobs without compromising labor productivity. So what you can say, more jobs. So you can use the jobless growth phrase of which we used in the previous answer, right? So by what you can say, that it will ensure that India no longer has the jobless growth, rather stay, consistently stays as the fastest growing economy of the world. So we've written two amazing positive things about India and Indian economy. Perfect. End your answer with that positive morale. This is how you conclude your answer. I hope that is absolutely clear. So this is how you should write your answer. What you shouldn't do, I have also said, don't just define and move ahead unless and until specifically asked. Definition should be the last resort for you and not the first option. So implement this in your answers and get the feedbacks and further keep on improving. When you are improving on some other thing, do not forget the previous things that you have learned. Ensure that that is also in mind. All right. So that's about it in this particular session of impact. In the next section, we'll be dealing with the second part of the Indian economy. Thank you.